Soddee Knight is a former state prosecutor and federal employee that was able to walk away from his full-time job as a lawyer due to his passive real estate income surpassing his W-2 salary over a year ago. He specializes in fix and flips and multifamily value add. After having achieved financial freedom as a real estate investor, Soddee has had ample time to reflect on some of the challenges he faced in his business. One many of us investors out there can relate to being how to effectively deal with contractors. In this episode, Soddee shares with us some tips and best practices that he implements in his business to mitigate risk when working with contractors. I'm very excited to have Soddee Knight with us here, hailing from Oklahoma City area. Welcome to the show, sir.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. I'm pleasure to be here and honored to be here.
All right, so let's go ahead and give our listeners a little bit of an idea about your background. Quite an interesting background there, and tell them how you got started in real estate.
Absolutely, yeah. So basically, kind of grew up in a family where they're traditional. Hey, go get education, get a job, and work for 40 years, and then retire someday. And so I said, well, let's do that. So I, undergrad, went to law school, was a state prosecutor, making terrible money, and then switched over to the federal government and did that. But all the while, I was buying real estate, just buying single family here or there, and then buying duplexes, and moved up to triplex. And so just doing that, just maybe 3 or 4 per year. And after a while, after accumulating those, and every once in a while I would switch one out. So I would change the equity in this one and buy maybe 2 or 3 more. After a while, I noticed that the cash flow, the passive cash flow, was keeping pace. And at the end, I say at the end, it overtook my active W-2 income with the federal government. So about a year ago, I just went ahead and started doing real estate full time, and all the while still buying real estate, and went ahead and got my real estate license in order to keep some of the transaction costs down a little bit. So that was big time, because you get a little bit more information and a little bit more access when you have your real estate license. Now, I don't recommend every real estate investor getting their real estate license, just because there's fees, and it's takes some time and all that kind of stuff. But so basically, that's where I am today. Just last week I purchased another multifamily, and basically, I go in and try to find off-market deals. Small multifamily is where we are, and that's kind of what we do. We have investors who they go in, and what we do is we put our money and put investors' money in, go in, buy the thing, fix it up, and then go to the bank and put some debt on it and cash everybody out, and then we go on to the next one. And basically we do the BRRRR strategy, but with small multifamily.
All right. And so you said mostly before, a lot of the multifamily that you are working on are kind of duplexes and triplexes. Now, I noticed one of your posts, I think it was in Facebook, that you're actually looking for larger multifamily. I think upwards of like 50 units right now. So can you tell us about the mindset shift with regards to this, and why you're kind of shifting a little bit from your traditional strategy to kind of more, I guess, mid-sized multifamily at the moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, we noticed that when we switched from single family to small multifamily, the cash flow per deal increased dramatically. So we love we love getting that passive income, and we noticed that, switching from from single family to small multifamily, we had to close one deal, but we get, for a triplex, we get 3 more rent checks coming in. So we're like, hold on, let's figure this out here. So we do one deal and we get more than one rent check. So let's go ahead and grow this. And one of the things that I've really been doing is, I'm a really big believer in education, and so I've been going to a lot of the how to analyze apartment buildings classes, and how to buy apartment buildings, how to buy apartment complexes courses and workshops. And the numbers, as far as scalability, and what a lot of your other guests have said, Dion, scalability and the cash flow numbers, as well as time. It's a lot faster. You get to your end goal a lot quicker by doing one deal and maybe having 50 doors in that one deal, rather than doing 50 deals. So that is the direction that we're headed. We are likely going to get some of the equity out of our small multifamily and transfer that equity into a mid-sized multifamily, commercial multifamily, like the 50 unit type situation. And we're going to be transitioning out of that later this year. Around about a few months from now is when we're going to really ramp that up.
So what do you think is one of the biggest challenge? And before we get into the other, I guess the main aspect of one of the things we wanted to talk about, what you and I spoke earlier, but what do you think is like one of the biggest challenges that you're faced with transitioning from smaller multifamily to a 50 unit, a mid-size?
So one of the things that I have been finding that's kind of a little bit different than what we've faced so far is the types of owners who are selling the mid-sized multi family is a different type of owner than the duplex owner, for example. The duplex owner is going to be a little bit less sophisticated. It might be a single person. And then what we've noticed with the mid-sized multi, typically it's a group of investors, and they all have to agree to sell it to our company. And it's there's a couple more hoops you have to jump through. The financing is about the same, really, just because we've always used commercial debt, commercial bank debt. So it's typically it's about the same. Our term sheet is about the same. So, but it's the sophistication level of the seller. I like to get discounts when I'm buying. And sometimes, I don't know if it's just this market that we're in right now, or if it's the sophistication level of the seller, but sometimes you're not able to get those same discounts that we're used to getting in the small multifamily space, and certainly the single family space. But yeah, the sophistication level, and I think maybe they know, they have a good idea of what it's worth, the true value. And there's a group of people, and a lot of times, they're professional folks. They have CPAs behind them and everything else. So that's kind of one of the big challenges that we're seeing right now is going in and having everybody on the group sign off on the deal that we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that, this was just a thought that just came to mind, from a return perspective, like a return on money that you've invested, when you're comparing these two, because, I'm sure perhaps that some of the duplexes and triplexes and quads that, things that you've done before, maybe you're able to get pretty reasonable, good discounts as far as you're concerned, maybe perhaps even at wholesale prices, right? So when you're going in, perhaps, all in with renovations, you might be at like 70, maybe 80% LTV, right? If you're at the max. Yeah, at the max. So, but going into these, 50 unit deals, you're saying that it's quite challenging to get similar, discounts. So do you think that this difference has impacted returns? Like, can you see like a big difference in returns, or because you're at a larger scale, it's not really making much of a difference?
Well, so we kind of have software that analyzes all that stuff, and analyzes kind of, every year we see the expected and projected returns. And one of the main reasons that we have yet to close one of these 50 unit deals is because the returns that we're used to receiving, they're just not there on those, on that size of unit. Now, I'm not saying that they're never going to be there, but yes, you're absolutely right. The returns that we're used to getting, and the return on equity, and the cash on cash return, and different, different characteristics of the deal that we look for, and the different metrics that need to be there for us to pull the trigger, so far have not been there on the mid-size multi family. But that's not to say that they're never going to be there, and we're going to keep looking for them. In the meanwhile, we'll still just keep buying those, the small multifamily, the triplex, the quad, and whatever, because those, we're able to get really good returns on those. And I believe you saw probably one of the, last year we did a deal, and I'm just kind of run through the numbers quickly. We did a deal, purchased a duplex. It was completely, it really needed a lot of work. It needed a rehab. Purchase price was, I believe, $25,000, and we put, it was $5,000 roof. And I know this sounds kind of crazy for the people on the coast, but here in Oklahoma, our materials and labor costs is a lot lower. So $5,000 for our roof, and we did a really great rehab on both sides, all for $15,000. So we're into the deal for 20, so all for about $45,000. Those units today are renting for $700 each side, and that duplex is now appraised for above $100,000. So we're putting in 45, maybe 50,000. The value of it is 100,000. So we're right at 50% all in. We got that equity in there, and it's cash flowing 14. I'm sorry, we're bringing in 1,400 a month, and it's cash flowing about $1,000 a month just from doing, at that, it was a rehab. It took us about 2 months to complete from start to finish. And that type of deal is pretty similar to the types of deals that we're used to doing. So getting, basically being all in equity for about 50%. We're not able to find that on the 50 unit side.
Yeah. All right. So, speaking of, because you've done a lot of deals where you're going in and you're doing rehabs and whatnot to them. I mean, because I've been on your website and I saw some of the pictures, and I mean, you guys do some really good work. I mean, really, really nice work. Now, let's move on to the subject of contractors, right?
Oh, yes.
Because at the beginning of the call, one of the things you told me was a really huge challenge. And I mean, I'm sure it's not just for you, but I think for a lot of people, even myself, I've done work in things with contractors. And I mean, it really is a pain. I mean, you're getting on the phone and you have to, yelling and screaming, like, where are you? You should be here. You're not on site, or they're doing something wrong, So anyways, let's talk about that aspect. So, what has your experience been like with contractors so far?
Absolutely. So, it has been a learning experience dealing with contractors. I'll say, I'll be the first to tell you, all contractors are not created equally. And, all contractors are not like choir boys. They sometimes they, come from different parts of the world and different, backgrounds, and are not, not so basically. You have to make sure everyone's interests are aligned, because if everyone's interests are not aligned, then there's going to be some miscommunication, and there's going to be some issues. We had kind of the learning experience that we had was, we were doing a rehab on it was a pretty big house. I think it was like a 4 or 5 bedroom house. And so we needed it done because this is back when we were flipping. We were going to flip this house, and, we were going to make a chunk of change and go to the next one. And so, when you're flipping a house, it's all based on time frame. The time, if it takes 6 months instead of 6 weeks, how much you're gonna make is going to be impacted greatly. So we had a set of contractors who went in and they did an okay job, and then up front they didn't tell us that they didn't work on the weekends. So they were never there on the weekend working, which to me that blew my mind, because they were not going to get their pay until they finished the job. So in our new service agreement, we put in there, listen, we need to know what your projected work days are going to be, and so that everyone's on the same page. And also, one big thing that made a huge difference is we have a penalty for going over our projected timeline, and we also give our contractors bonuses for finishing the job early. So a lot of the times we'll put a 5 or 10% penalty per day of the total contract value in the contract for finishing, for going over timeline, and then we'll put a 5 to 10% bonus in per day for finishing early, because every day that they can finish early is a day that we can get it rented out faster and complete the job quicker and start the cash out refinance process quicker, get our investors their money back quicker, go on to the next deal quicker and do more deals that year quicker and make more money. So for us, it's speed and also quality, and we put that in our service agreements, and we kind of had to learn that the hard way. But as far as finding contractors, one big piece of advice I would tell all the folks out there listening is go to your local RIA and talk to the folks that are actually doing business, doing work, and ask them, say, hey, who do you use? Who's been a reliable contractor for you? And then just go with those folks, because other investors is kind of how you're going to learn what you need to learn whenever you're just starting out in single family or multifamily or whatever you're starting out in. So those RIAs are very important for getting those connections to good contractors, and then having your service agreement. Make sure your contractor signs your service agreement and agrees to your service agreement, and not the other way around. You should maybe look at theirs, sign theirs, read it, know what's in it, but certainly make them sign your service agreement, and that way everybody's on the same page on what's going on and everyone's interests are aligned.
So how do you handle the payment aspect of the agreement? Like, how is that written out in the agreement typically?
Yeah, in the agreement. So at this point in in my investing career, we only work with our contractors that we've worked with before. So our general contractors are, whether it be our cabinet people or plumbers or whatever. And so what we do is we tell them, depending on the size of the job, typically if it's a larger job, we'll have 4 draws. And, for example, they'll get the first draw after 25% of the work has been completed and it's satisfactory to everybody. They'll get the first 25% draw, and then so on and so forth. Once it's halfway done, they'll get the other 25%, and then we'll just keep going like that until the job is complete. And then at the very end, if there's a bonus or a penalty associated, depending on if they finished early or if they if they went overtime, then that'll be kind of assessed and accounted for at the very end of the deal. So that's worked out very well for everybody. My contractors like working with me because I pay when I say I'm going to pay, and I pay the bonus. Even when they finish early, I pay the bonus, and they're happy with that, and they keep coming back and working with us, and they do a fantastic job.
So let me ask you as a follow-up, because you mentioned completion, right? So how do you measure completion? Like how do you set that up? Do you write that specifically in the contract, like XYZ, this is 25%, ABC or whatnot? How do you measure that?
So in the contract, we put, we enter all the key terms of the agreement in the contract, and I learned that the hard way too. And just a quick story, there was a contractor who we wanted a bathtub placed from kind of over the side, up against the wall. Or no, I'm sorry, the bathtub, the original bathtub was in the middle of the floor, and we wanted it up against the wall.
In the middle of the floor.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was in the middle of the floor.
Okay.
So of course we wanted it up against the wall in the bathroom, and so our old agreement didn't specify kind of specifically every detail of the job, and so the sewer line, the outflow line with the bathtub, that contractor did not move the line from the center of the bathroom floor over. And then he complained that, that wasn't in the contract. Now, we no longer work with them, but I learned that every single detail, if you can, put that in the contract and the agreement. So back to your question, how do we know what 25% is? So we look at every single detail, and we look at the list of key terms of the agreement, and we kind of just separate that out, and we say, okay, we have 10 key terms in the agreement, and the details associated with those key terms. And once 3 of them are done, then we'll give you the first draw, the first 25%. So we'll just look at it like that and check it off the list. Okay, let's see, you finished all the baseboards, you finished all the painting, and you also finished the ceiling fans or whatever. And then we'll put that in there and check them off the box. And once those things are done and the quality is good and everything is satisfactory, then we'll give them their first 25% draw. And typically it works just fine. And then at the very end, that's kind of when we go through and make sure everything is right. And they're at the end, they'll do anything it takes to get their last bit of money. So they're going through and really making sure that it's right. And that's just another thing to make sure everybody's interests are aligned.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, because I've seen and I've heard people handle this slightly differently as well. So it sounds as though that your payment is coming at the end of each benchmark, right?
That's correct.
So what about people, like what would you say to people that have contractors that say, well, listen, you need to pay me something up front, or pay for materials, or what would your suggestion be to them for that?
We typically pay for a lot of the materials, but be very careful with paying anyone any money up front. So when we're first working with any new contractor, we always get their driver's license information and make them fill out a W-4 for our CPA. So to me, it's been my experience that once they know that you have their driver's license and you're a serious, this is not like you're not doing this for a hobby, then we haven't had anybody run off on us yet. And I think that kind of plays into it. Once they see that, hey, you know where they live, you have their driver's license number and all that, then I feel like they are more kind of tied to it, and they're not going to run off, leave the country with your money or whatever after you've paid them. So we don't do that anymore because we work with people that we always work with. But when we were starting new relationships, we make sure we kind of do a light background check on these folks, just, public records, making sure that these people are who they say they are, and they're not, maybe being sued by everybody in town or something like that. Just a public records search, get their driver's license, make them sign the agreement, make them sign the W-4 for tax purposes, so you can get your deductions and all that at the end of the year. And that has worked out well for us. So, if you're a new person starting out and the contractor says, "Hey, I need some money up front," say, "Well, instead of me giving you money up front, can I just go buy the materials, or or something like that?" Because that is that's a position, you're in a weak position at that point, and so it's kind of tough. But do what you can to mitigate all your risk.
So what would you do, or how do you go about verifying the quality of work?
Yeah, and that's kind of where the thing that I said earlier about getting these relationships from your local RIA members, people that are actually in your market doing doing business, doing deals. And that's how I got a lot of my connections. Just going to more experienced investors and saying, "Listen, I need a plumber. I need a guy to do some sheetrock or whatever. I need a general contractor. Who do you use? And what has been your experience with them?" And and that way they have someone to kind of you have a recommendation to go on. So you want to use people's recommendations as much as you can, and people will be happy to give you recommendations. If you're ever in the Oklahoma City market, I'd be happy to give you all my recommendations for people that that do high quality work and do it at a a good speed, and so you can get in, do high quality work relatively quickly, and go on to the next project. So yeah, that's kind of how I operate. Use those connections at the RIAs and different real estate meetings.
So, and one last question as well. What about like workmanship type warranties? Do you work this into your deal at all, or?
Absolutely, yes. Our service agreement there, is pretty comprehensive, and typically we do our folks always agree to a 90-day labor warranty, and they'll just come right back out. If they're putting down some plank flooring, and piece of the flooring comes undone or something, they'll come right out and make sure that everything is right. So any kind of service agreement that we enter into, we always have that at least 90-day warranty to make sure that everything is good to go, and we don't have any issues with tenants complaining about things not working the way they should. We haven't had any issues with that. They do high quality work. We haven't had any of our people to have to get called out, I take that back. There's folks that we no longer work with. We had to call them back out to do one other thing, to do they didn't do something, but the folks that we work with regularly now, we haven't had any issues with quality, just because me and my team were checking to make sure that the quality is good as they're going along.
Okay. So, and the one last question that just came to mind too is with regards to insurance. How do you
Yes.
how do you handle that? Because I mean, if they're on your property and they get hurt, right, then that's you're liable for that. Am I correct? Or
Well, yes. So my insurance would be the backup insurance to their insurance, and we make sure that they are insured, and that's also in the service agreement. So
Mhm.
you're basically, it sounds like you got a copy of my service agreement right in front of you, but but I know you don't. So, but no, that is completely in the service agreement, that that they have to be insured. They basically they're contesting, they're basically vouching that they are insured and that they have the correct insurance for anything that may happen. And then one other thing, I think basically you almost covered my whole service agreement. One other thing that we put in the service agreement is we've had this happen to us. So we kind of go as we learn as we go. And, you know, the contractor or general contractor will tell us, yeah, this is going to cost $10,000 to do X, Y, and Z, right? And then 2/3 of the way through the job, they say, well, no, it's not going to cost $10,000. It's going to cost $15,000. So in order to guard against that, we put a clause in our service agreement that says, under no circumstances will we pay more than 5% more than the quoted price. And we put that 5% more in there because we understand that sometimes, you open up walls or you open up floors or what have you. Sometimes there's just things that happen that you just could never have known. So we put that in there. But we put that in there also letting them know that they can't come back to us and say, listen, we have a brand new price all of a sudden and it's 50% more or whatever. It's way more than what you originally quoted us, because we based we based selecting you based on what you told us on the quote price. Now we don't always use the cheapest person, and we learned that the hard way too. We get 3 or 4 bids, and we don't ever go with the highest, the most expensive, and we don't go with the cheapest. But we have our same people that we typically use. We have 3 or 4 or 5 plumbers, 3 or 4 or 5 general contractors, 3 or 4 or 5 HVAC folks, 3 or 4 or 5 electricians, and we always get bids, and sometimes their prices, sometimes Mr. Smith is the lowest. Sometimes Mr. Johnson is the lowest. So we don't ever use the lowest bid, and we don't ever use the highest bid, and we learn that the hard way.
All right. So what would be a suggestion that you have for people that are looking at doing this and getting into this business?
So one main thing, just kind of going back with contractors, you have to make sure that someone is at the job site every day reviewing their work. And that's something that we also kind of learned the hard way. You don't ever want to show up at the same time every day, because they'll get the hey, let's show up at 4 o'clock because we know he's going to be here at 5 o'clock. So so that part of the business is a little bit more active. When you're doing a rehab that's active, you kind of want to see it or have someone on your team view the work every single day to make sure things are getting done. But generally, if someone wants to get into this business, what should they do? I'm a real big proponent of education and learning about the business first. If you get into this business and you don't know what you're doing, you're going to lose all your money. So, education is more valuable than, maybe jumping in and doing a deal right away. So, if you're just brand new, I would say read all you can, learn all you can. There's many YouTube videos, books out there, people who are experts who have done this for 10, 20 years. So get as much education about the subject as you can before you start. But also, you don't want to be one of these people that all they do is get education and never start. But for my recommendation, I would say learn all you can for about a year, and then start making those acquisitions, whether it be with a partner or with yourself.
Now, I know you're a voracious reader. You love reading, and you have a couple of book recommendations for our listeners today. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what they are?
Oh, big time. I love reading about real estate in general. So for me lately, Multifamily Millions has been big. That is basically like the Bible of multifamily investing. And another one for me, just for anybody who wants to do or accomplish anything, is The One Thing by Gary Keller. Once you read that, it's like almost impossible not to go out and accomplish something that you've always wanted to accomplish. And it's a very good book. I recommend that to not only real estate investors, but just like I say, anyone who wants to accomplish anything. It's great. And another one of my favorites is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, which is a really good really good for running, kind of learning how to coordinate operating a business.
So how could our listeners get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out?
Yeah. Our listeners can go to knightlandcompany.com, and you can just click on the Contact Us tab. And that's Knight Land Company. That's KNIGHT, landcompany.com. They can go on there and just click on the Contact Us, and me or someone on our team will get back to you if you have any questions. I love to talk to new and experienced real estate investors all the time. I can do this all day. It's like one of my favorite things to talk about.